The Charleston Literary Festival will be getting underway shortly. We want to welcome Michelle Norris, award-winning journalist and author of Hidden Conversations. She's also the host and executive producer of Your Mama's Kitchen podcast and so much more. We're so glad that you could be with us.
I am thrilled to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So first, you're such an accomplished journalist, for one thing. You've been in the world of journalism your whole life. When did you make that transition into writing books, and why did you decide to write this particular one?
Well, this is my second book, and it sort of grew out of the first book, because when I wrote my first book about my family's very complex racial legacy, I went out in America and I knew I would be talking about race, and I thought that that was a subject that a lot of people were uncomfortable talking about. And so I created a vehicle to make those conversations easier, and I did it with postcards. Mm-hmm. I invited people to send me their 6-word stories on postcards. I actually think I have one of the postcards actually here. This is what I said.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And much to my surprise, a lot of people started sending me postcards, and then we moved it into a space online where people could submit their cards digitally. And over the years, we started to get hundreds of cards and then hundreds of thousands of cards. And that led to the second book, Our Hidden Conversations, because the stories that people shared were so open and honest, and they came from all corners of America and more than 100 countries. They came from Black Americans, white Americans, Indigenous Americans, Latino Americans, working class Americans, veterans, you name it. So many people pulled up to the table to tell me their story that I wanted to basically go in the inbox and share that with America.
Wow. So really all walks of life. And within those 6-word stories, can you give us a few examples?
Well, right away, I knew that I had hit a taproot, because people were saying things to me that I wasn't hearing when I was, for instance, hosting a little show called All Things Considered at NPR. I mean, people were just opening their hearts and saying things like, reason I ended a sweet relationship. White, not allowed to be proud. I'm only Asian when it's convenient. My son's not half, he is double. Wow. Said dirt, so I scrubbed. Grandma, you can't say that anymore. Lady, I don't want your purse. And then he died in our alley. I mean, it took me into hidden histories and people's homes and people's hearts. And I wound up being able to have really deep conversations, with people. Someone, writing in, you're nothing but poor white trash. The word white trash coming up over and over and over again.
Wow.
So being able to talk to people about what it's like to hear that, most often from their family members.
Really? That's a shock. So what did you learn from this, and what do you hope that other people learn from this? Not only just the state of kind of what our society is in, but how do we then correct some of these perceptions?
Well, thank you for asking that, because I learned a few things. A big epiphany for me is that when we have conversations about race in America, or really even about, well, definitely about race, but sometimes even about identity, it is presumed that those conversations are for one class of people, and that usually means brown people or Black people. And this exercise has taught me that a lot of people have something to say, and they're not always invited to the table. Right. And I think that that's why so many people stepped up to say things. There are a lot of people who are very conservative and feel like no one's asking me how I feel about things. And in this case, they would send me their stories, and I would have a chance to talk to them deeply. And we didn't always agree, but we wound up having really interesting and deep conversations. And so that was a big epiphany for me. But I hope that other people, and that's what's happening in Charleston when I'm, coming there this weekend, will use this as an opportunity to talk to each other, to learn from each other, to just create a little tethers of understanding, not with the idea that everybody's going to agree, because we're not.
Right.
We live in a divided America, but we also live in an America where we have to coexist. Mm-hmm. In most of our spaces, we coexist with people who are different than us, with people who perhaps we don't agree with, with people who practice a different religion, who eat different food, who have maybe a different value system. And yet you have to figure out how to deal with your coworker, your fellow student, your neighbor. And sometimes narrative is the thing that can keep people, I don't know if I want to even say bonded together, but keep people connected, in a way at least be productive and curious and build some sort of bonds that allow us to coexist in the United States of America.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to end this. Before we do go, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows about your podcast. Can you just give us a brief description as to what you talk about on your podcast?
When I was in radio for years, and you know this as a broadcaster, you ask people a couple of questions so they can get the mic check so you can understand what the voice levels are like.
Right.
One of the questions I asked people just to warm them up was, tell me about your mama's kitchen. And it worked every time. They always, they told me great stories, and I thought that would be a great podcast. And last year, we actually created a podcast. We just started our second season, and the second season started with a South Carolinian, actually two, Stephen Colbert and his wife, Ebby, were kickoff guests for season 2, and it was a great conversation, and I learned a whole lot about South Carolina cuisine. They have great cooking.
Well, we want to thank you so much, Michelle. Just want to make sure everybody realizes Charleston Literary Festival is running a citywide reading initiative on March 1st focused on the book Our Hidden Conversations, What Americans Really Think About Race and Identity. Michelle, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much.
We're back after this.